We talk a lot about some of the social and political agendas being pushed on kids in schools. We have particularly done a lot of stories out of the Olympia, Washington school district. That seems to be ground zero for some of this stuff. And there really doesn't seem to be a lot of consequences for teachers who engage in clearly unacceptable behavior by pushing their personal agendas on young kids. I mean, we have done some really astounding stories, but what's unique about the story today is that it is captured on tape. So what happened in this 6th grade science classroom in the Olympia school district was so unhinged, so off topic, that a 6th grade girl decided that she was going to secretly record it so that she could be sure that her parents could hear exactly what happened. Now, I'm going to give you a little context, but then we're just going to play the full tape for you, because to truly understand how crazy it is, you just have to hear it for yourself. So this was supposed to be, as I said, a science lesson. It was supposed to be a lesson on bugs. All the kids were going to be creating a square depicting an insect for a quilt. Okay, that sounds fine. That sounds appropriate for 6th graders in a science class to do a project like that. But then the teacher invited in a fellow teacher to give an unplanned, unapproved presentation that turned into a presentation about quilts that were made in the name of social justice. So this young girl student ends up, you're going to hear the recording pick up right after this teacher, Karina Champion, starts to talk about former President Ronald Reagan.
Because this disease was primarily affecting gay people and he was homophobic, he chose to stop any funding to go towards trying to solve this disease. And people were dying in huge, huge numbers because of his homophobia. Now we have medicines that we can take that prevent you from even getting HIV. We have medicines that help you care for your body if you do get HIV, to the point where now the virus isn't even able to be found in your blood because it's at such a low level that you can't even infect other people with it. So because people organized around this issue, and now this quilt has 50,000 panels of people who were killed by this virus, and it gets taken and displayed all over the world now. Not only has our government changed its policies and made it so that scientists could get money to study this disease and stop it from spreading, but it's happened in other countries all around the world. So this is a more recent one. Does anybody know who Trayvon Martin is? No? Okay. So Trayvon Martin was a kid who was a little bit older than you. He was 13 years old. He went to go walk to the corner store and got some Skittles and an iced tea for his brother. And on his way home, a white supremacist was following him in his truck and yelling at him, and then got out and killed him. And the person who killed him did not go to jail, was not charged because of a racist law that's currently in Florida that allows people to kill someone else if they are scared. And how this law is generally applied is by white supremacists who say they were scared just by the presence of a black or brown person. Just because they're different. So this quilt was made in protest of that event. And the reason it says rest in power Trayvon Martin is that because of the lack of judicial support in this event, people organized to create what is now the Black Lives Matter movement to try and get laws changed so that people who are black and brown have the same protections as people who are white, which is what our country is supposed to stand for, is justice for all. So our issue obviously is not as profound and intense of an issue as some of these, but it's still something that's really important to the 7th and 8th graders, and it's going to be a big project that you have the opportunity to work on as you are moving up to 7th grade. And so The 7th and 8th graders wanted to invite you to work on this with them. And what they are working on is educating people about the plants that we planted out in our food and medicine forest.
What? I've listened to that several times now, and I tell Nicole every time, this is the craziest thing we've talked about when it comes to public schools. These kids were in a science class, and they were supposed to be learning about bugs. They were supposed to be learning about insects in science class. And as you heard there at the end of the tape, this teacher who came in, a 7th and 8th grade math and science teacher, she teaches both, who wanted to talk to them about what was supposed to be, again, a science-related project where the 7th and 8th graders are making a quilt that's going to depict different kinds of plants and also insects. And she was there to tell them, like, hey, the 7th and 8th graders would love you, since you're going to be in 7th grade next year, to help get started helping them with this quilt project about plants and bugs. And instead, what does she do? She shares with them a presentation about quilts, yes, but about social justice quilts, about how Ronald Reagan was a homophobe and so he let people die from HIV/AIDS. How Trayvon Martin was murdered by a white supremacist who was never even charged, which is, I mean, just factually wrong. She said Trayvon Martin was about your age, 13, talking to, 11, 12, 13-year-olds. I don't know what, trying to scare them and make them feel like if they're not white, somebody's just going to come up and kill them. Trayvon Martin was 17, not 13. She also says the white supremacist, George Zimmerman, who was Hispanic, was never arrested and never charged. No, that wasn't true. He went to trial for murder. He was acquitted. So not only is it completely inappropriate, unhinged, has nothing to do with the topic of science or insects, she's also spewing things to these kids that are just factually wrong. In one perusal, a quick perusal of her Facebook page, will come as no surprise to you. She's obviously pushing her own political and social beliefs on these kids. I mean, a couple of her pictures on Facebook, she's from going on her Facebook, it looks like she's in a same-sex relationship, which is totally fine, and she's supportive of, LGBTQ issues. That has nothing to do with a science lesson on bugs. She also has this profile picture graphic that says, a vote for Trump is a vote against my family. Again, fine, it's your personal Facebook. Have whatever political opinions that you want. She's got other pictures of Black Lives Matter movement and stuff. The problem is when your personal political opinions seep into the classroom, especially when we're talking about 6th grade students that aren't even your students. You were a guest in the classroom. You were supposed to be talking about a science project, and instead you're railing against homophobia, white supremacy, racism, and all of these things. And then we were doing a little research on this teacher because according to parents we've spoken to in the district, this teacher has a track record of pushing politics and social issues on kids. We'll get to more on that in a moment, but we came across this article in Thurston Talk where it just waxes poetic about how Karina Champion, this teacher, grew up and went through the Olympia Public School District. It says, Olympia helped grow a teacher. Now Karina Champion is helping grow the minds of local youth. God forbid. That is not the person I want growing the minds of local youth. It says, Karina Champion and her enthusiasm for teaching, for students' growth and quality instruction is a treasure for Olympia students and their families. Yeah, what I heard in that tape is not a treasure of a teacher. It's someone who has an agenda, doesn't care how young your kid is going to push that agenda on your kids. So anyway, the mom of this 6th grader who took this tape has actually twins in that class, a boy and a girl, twin 6th graders. And she actually mostly homeschools her kids. Her name is Jake McCullough. She mostly homeschools her kids, but look, as your kids get older, there are some courses, science and math that you might just not feel comfortable teaching. And so she sends them for a couple classes to the Olympia School District and chooses specifically classes taught by teachers who they trust. Not teachers like Karina Champion, who just, unbeknownst to parents, shows up in this class and pushes her political and social issues on kids. So Jake McCullough was nice enough to join us and talk about what was taught in her kids' science class and what she tried to do after the fact to make sure that there was accountability. Jake, thank you for being here.
I appreciate you having me, Brandi.
I am stunned by this, and I don't get stunned easy. As a parent, we'll get into the details, but I have to imagine, is this the first time, by the way, you've ever spoken out about something that's happened in a classroom, in the news?
Absolutely.
So how you feeling
A
about
little, a
how you
little,
feeling about
a
doing
little
that?
nervous.
Yeah, a little nervous.
A little nervous.
Well, this is exactly what we need. We say it on the show all the time. You know, there's so many ridiculous things that happen, and I know parents feel that way, but they need to say something. And so I'm so glad you're willing to do this. So, first, you have a 6th grade daughter.
I have a set of twins in that 6th grade class. So I have a boy-girl set of twins in that classroom.
Gotcha. And so this is through something called ORLA. Explain to me, it's public, it's part of the Olympia School District, but explain to people what that is.
So it's the Olympia Regional Learning Academy, which is shortened to ORLA. It's an extension of the district that houses their Montessori program. It houses what we call their H Connect, which would be what my students are in, where a homeschool family can opt in and take certain classes within the district still. And I believe it also houses their virtual online programs where students are taking the online Washington Academy.
Gotcha. So as we dive into this, have you as a parent had any problems up to this point with the Olympia School District, even ones that maybe you didn't voice concerns over?
I think if we had anything, I've gone either to my teacher or I've gone to a principal and addressed areas of concern. And we just have never had anything of this magnitude or had to deal with something like this.
Yeah, so let's dive into it. I gave a little bit of an introduction, but explain to folks what class this was and what the lesson was supposed to be about.
So we are a hybrid homeschool family, and this year we chose to take science at Orla. We wanted the twins to have an introduction to chemistry this year, and therefore we get to pick our classes and we also get to pick our teachers. And we had chosen a teacher that we were comfortable with and just wanted them to go through the science experience this year. It's not something I wanted to teach chemistry as far as this year. So in their classroom, they were supposed to be having a bug quilt was supposed to be the topic, where the students were supposed to be designing a square of a bug. And their teacher invited in a guest speaker, another teacher, to give a presentation. And that's how the event or when it occurred.
Gotcha. Bug square sounds pretty innocuous, sounds right in line with, what should be taught in that class. Were you as a parent or were students expecting there to be a guest presentation?
No, we were not informed there would be a guest speaker, and the students were told approximately 15 minutes prior.
Gotcha. And were they told what the presentation would be about 15 minutes prior?
No, they were not. They were never informed. They didn't know the teacher who was coming in. Parents weren't notified of a guest speaker. They didn't know the topic. They assumed it was on the bug quilt because that was what they were supposed to be working on.
Gotcha. So this guest teacher did in fact talk about quilts, but those quilts had nothing to do with bugs. So there's a recording of what happened. Take me through your understanding of what was said.
So my understanding and what I have heard, and the district has actually verified these statements to be accurate as well. So they have, they're not denying them. And the teacher presented a slideshow, and in the slideshow, there are 7 slides. I didn't get to see the slides until the day before I met with the district, even though I did request to review using 2081. I requested to review all curriculum. They withheld the slides from me. So I saw the slides 5 minutes before my meeting with the district. So I had heard audio, but I wasn't able to match those up visually with the slides. So there were 7 slides and not a lot of verbiage at the bottom. So you're kind of just trying to figure out, they are all political. The title of the slideshow is History of Quilts for Awareness and Activism. That's the actual title of the slides. And as we move through, we get to a point in a slide that an AIDS quilt is shown. And this is when my daughter, right before this, she started to get extremely uncomfortable. And it referred to the teacher describing and referring to a president as homophobic, and that he reduced funding to AIDS and prolonged the disease due to his homophobia. Do you want me to continue?
Keep going. I just wanted to tell people it's Ronald Reagan.
Okay, yeah. So the next slide was a slide that said, "Rest in power, Trayvon Martin." The teacher proceeded to ask if the students knew who Trayvon Martin was, and my understanding is most of the kids had no response. She told them that he was close in their age, 13, not 17. She told him that he was followed home by a man after he went to get Skittles and ice cream for his brother, and a man followed him in a truck. A white supremacist man followed him and then killed him. She told him that the man was not charged or tried in a court of law, and that people, white supremacist people, tend to apply this law in Florida to use fear and say they are scared to have a reason to kill brown and black people.
I don't even know where to go with that. So first, obviously your daughter felt, like you said, uncomfortable enough where she knew something wasn't right, and she's documenting this. And I'm assuming you heard the recording and that's when you said, I've got to reach out to the school about this, right? Yeah. Correct.
We were doing wind down for the evening, actually, and just kind of everybody talks about their day. And the twins came to us and say, can we talk about something? And we're like, sure. And they said, well, something happened at school today. Can we talk about it? And then that's when we were aware there was a recording. So the very next day, then, yes, I was present at the school asking to speak with the principal.
Yeah. So you went, what was the reception like from the school when you said, hey, this is what happened, I want to talk about it?
At first, there was a little bit of, I would not give them a recording. And there was a little bit of disbelief in the sense of, I told them that there was one and that I had heard it. So I didn't want her to be accused of lies or embellishing, because that's I didn't want them to have that option to accuse her of that. And there was a lot of posturing, I guess is a word I can think of how are we going to say that, well, sometimes we teach history in science class and we are allowed to cross over topics and things like that. And so that's kind of how the conversation started.
And I think what's so horrible about that is you, as you alluded to earlier, as a part homeschool family, you chose this for science. You wanted them to be in a science class. And so then to have them in this class being taught about things that, no dispute, are not about science and are very political in nature is wild. Now, how did they justify not giving you the slides? Not letting you have, and you said you haven't, one of the pictures you haven't even seen, correct? That was shown on the slide?
I've seen the picture. They won't release the picture. I thought that one was that we should have a copy of the entire slideshow, but that one, the image of Trayvon Martin that was used in that slide, one, there's no sightings of sources that she used. I was told that supplemental material is brought together by the teacher, so it's their material. And so I was not, again, given the slides. I think our concern is the subject matter was completely appropriate. 11 to 13-year-olds aren't able to discern some of those events as factuals. There's a few other families that have spoken to their children and they say, we believed it because our teacher said it. And, it's that position of power. The subject matter was inappropriate. They have admitted that the teacher, there's a policy 2331 in the district, and it's covered in the Act of Freedom in their contract with OSD 11 and the Olympia Education Association. So basically the teachers union. They have admitted that she violated that policy, and that is an unannounced speaker coming into the classroom, a controversial, sensitive subject not being told and notified to parents to allow an opt-out, no opposing views to be given. And so these are points that we went in and challenged on in the sense of, you're going to need to address this and correct this. And that was the investigation that we originally asked to happen. And they have admitted that she violated that policy.
Now, they've admitted she violated the policy. Have they expressed regret of the content of the lesson?
We feel that they've glossed over it. We had to push really hard. This has been about 3.5 weeks in the making. And we felt other families needed to know what went on in that classroom. And they kept saying, no, it's like a math problem. And we can just go in, if we teach something wrong in math, the teacher goes in and corrects the math information. And then, the students understand that and we move on. I said, this is different. You violated a controversial and sensitive issues policy, and families have a right to know.
I'm just going to say her name. Karina Champion is the individual who gave this lesson, has a little bit of history with the school district.
She is known for controversial stances. And I think our issue with this is that she presented this to 7th and 8th graders as well. And the school did not do any kind of misinformation or let those families know. She did not have to come in and apologize to the students whatsoever. The principal, the assistant principal, came in, kind of glossed over what misinformation, and maybe we shouldn't use charged language, words like homophobia or white supremacist. And it was like, that was enough. She actually lied to the kids. And so she's known to take a political stance, which is why we don't take her as a teacher. But, we're wanting to see the district actually follow through on their action steps in disciplining. And they're telling us that we can't have an outcome. But if we look at what their policies also say, it says a citizen's complaint can be made. And if you don't get resolution, you go to the next step. If you don't get resolution, you go to the next step. So our question to them is, how are you going to show us resolution if you won't talk about discipline or outcomes with this teacher?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an issue for the media too. Whenever we do a story on a teacher that has crossed a line, we're not allowed to know. They won't speak about personnel issues. So we have no way of letting the public know, hey, has this been resolved? It's ridiculous. So there's a ton of issues with this. You mentioned the Parental Bill of Rights and the initiative that took effect on June the 6th. So this class sounds like it was right before that actually became law. But after it became law, that's when you've been trying to get your hands on this material, which you haven't been successful in. Do you feel like they're violating the law?
They told me they're going to violate the law. So I actually used on June 6th is when I requested to do a curriculum review, the day the law went into effect. And they didn't know what 2081 was. And not only that, they didn't know their own violation policy of 2331 of controversial and sensitive issues. They didn't know their policy from the district, and they didn't know what 2081 was. That's what allowed me to ask to see the curriculum. I went in then and reviewed all of science and all of history. Since they were claiming that you could cross over history to science, I wanted to see what approved curriculum there was for history. And I asked for all supplemental material as well. And the pushback was, well, we don't really give out supplemental, material. That's information and things that the teachers put together themselves. What I have found through this process is supplemental material does not go through core curriculum standards committee review. So what it allows is teachers like this to basically put things together and push that envelope in their agenda. She knew she put this together. She knew the group she was speaking to. She knew there wasn't going to be another teacher in the classroom. It had intent behind it, is our view on it, and that she was lying and manipulating and giving false and biased information and labels to young children. And so we used 2081. And again, they wouldn't give us the slides. I had to view them in person. I still don't have the slides. And they announced Autumn Laura from the district executive was in the meeting that day. I saw the slides 5 minutes before. And we were basically told on issues of social justice that they have been informed through OSPE and the board that they won't give out notifications and they won't follow opt-out guidelines.
They said that. They said that they will not, on social justice issues, follow the new law on Parental Bill of Rights.
Correct. Part of the issue with that is I asked them, I said, so if we request to see the material, so there is no developed curriculum for social justice standards. This is all supplemental material. So there is no core packaged material that you can review as a parent. And I said, so you're teaching curriculum in social justice and other areas that has never been reviewed by a curriculum standards committee. And she said, And I said, and that's okay. She's like, you'd have to ask OSFI, but that's, yes, it is supplemental, and no supplemental material has to go through that kind of review.
Wow. And we will ask the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction about that and about this case, because when you think about that, that's wild. So you're saying that, oh, parents can see curriculum, like that's no big deal. But then you're also saying that teachers can, at will, at any time, without any oversight, essentially manufacture their own curriculum, call it supplemental material, and the parents can never see it. So what good is any sort of law mandating that parents can have access to curriculum if you're saying that supplemental curriculum can come out of nowhere and we can't see that? That is insane, and that's a much bigger issue than this one teacher going haywire. So what would you like to see here? What outcome would you like to see?
I think there needs to be an acknowledgement by the district that I think the 7th and 8th grade parents first should know, because they swept that under the rug, that those whole classes do not know. Secondly, we should announce that there was a violation of policy, have them held accountable for standards in both 2331, which is, and that also relates to the academic freedom, because in their own agreement with the district and their academic freedom for supplemental material, if they're going to present controversial materials, they have to run it by a principal, or they have to show professional judgment. We have countered that she was unprofessional in her judgment, and that is misconduct by the RCW standards. And we are asking for misconduct in this case.
Wow. What would your advice be to parents? You know, here you've clearly taught your kids well to you know, pay attention when something doesn't, you know, trust their gut when something doesn't feel right. So in that regard, but also, you know, your willingness to now come and speak out about these things. What would your message be to other parents who have similar concerns?
I think we have to really remember that when we think it's science, we have to do better, and we're going to have to follow through. More of us are going to have to look at curriculum. We're going to have to make them accountable. I'm looking for accountable answers of how this could have happened in a science classroom. And I'm hoping other parents, because this wasn't easy for us to come forward, I'm hoping we inspire some other parents to come forward and say, you're not the only one, and this has happened, and this has happened. And it helps make them accountable for the steps that they need to do with 2081, and in providing content to parents that we have a right, and that we are the end-all be-all overseer of our children's education. And that's what the new law allows us to do, is to opt out. And they're saying they won't provide that safe space or an alternative learning experience. They're basically saying no.
It's wild stuff. Jake, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you being willing to speak out about it. And also, you know, these sorts of things, I mean, we only know about a fraction of what happens, you know, and the stories we've heard are already troubling enough. So we know that this is happening more often than we realize. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
What in the hell? I mean, honestly. So that is Jake McCullough. She has twins in a 6th grade class in the Olympia School District, supposed to be a science class. One of her kids recorded a teacher giving a presentation on what was supposed to be about a project to make a quilt out of different bugs and insect pictures, and instead talks about how Ronald Reagan was a homophobe and let gay people die of AIDS because he hated them, talks about the Trayvon Martin case, tells a bunch of lies about it, says it was strictly a result of white supremacy. The teacher, again, Karina Champion, who's known for doing this in the Olympia School District. This is one of the most problematic school districts in the entire nation. I mean, when you look at some of the stories that have come out of it. So this is what we've done. We've reached out to not only the school district, but also we sent an email this morning to Karina Champion to ask her why she felt like this was appropriate content for a 6th grade science class. We have also reached out to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction to inquire about this case, but also the broader issues here. We now have a new law on the books, and I know that people are trying to pick it apart in court, but we have a new law on the books that is the will of voters and the will of the legislature that passed the initiative, that is supposed to give parents a right to know about these things, to have an opportunity to opt their kids out of these things, to review curriculum, to review supplemental material. But this parent, Jake McCullough, has not today, as of this morning, been given the slides that were shown to her kids. They won't let her have the slides. Why do you think that is? Because they don't want her to send them to us. They don't want her to put them out publicly. They don't want the public to know what was taught to kids in a public school district. They let her sit and review them, but they wouldn't give them to her. Crazy stuff. So we're going to be putting out after the show today a full story with all of the information from this segment, so you can share it. I was shocked by the clip. So glad this sixth grader had the presence of mind to pull out her phone and start recording, or else you know what would have happened? The school district would have denied it. Oh no, she's exaggerating. That's not what was said. That's not what happened. It is what happened. It is what is said. It was caught on tape. They can't deny it. Now they need to answer for it. Let's hope they do.